Hey everyone, episode number 3 is going to be something I have never done before. Greg and I are going to talk about our friends, and we're going to kind of break them into two camps, right? We both have sets of friends that are wildly successful, are arguably millionaires, multimillionaires, and nine figures. And then there's folks that are in our network that are struggling. And when I kind of sat back on Christmas and thought about it, I see differences. But before I get into what I've seen, let me just welcome Greg Dickerson to the show. How you doing, man?
Doing great, Michael. Good to be here.
Thanks, buddy. Hey, so one of the things I was doing on Christmas, because Christmas was very different this year, is I was reflecting a lot. Because again, on this channel, the things that we do every Monday, we are truly trying to help people. And one of the things that I came to kind of think about for a while was I have a set of friends that are quote unquote rich, and I have a set of friends that aren't rich. And I'm starting to see some, it's not all the time, but there are some subtleties that are very different, I think. For example, generally speaking, the folks that are quote unquote rich generally lean positive, right? The glass half full type, right? They see opportunities while the other side typically wants to that the glass is half empty. It's there's always problems, there's always negativity. And I don't know if that's just my network of friends, but when I think about the different camps, and I share this not to blame anyone, and I'm not going to use any names, but just to realize if you find yourself on one or the other, maybe you can pull yourself out. What do you think?
Yeah. So there's exceptions to every rule. So on
Of
both
course.
sides of that equation, you can find both cases. You can find some very positive, happy, fulfilled people that you just don't have a lot of, just don't have a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, a lot of it is they just don't know what they don't know, right? They just don't have the right training, the right surrounding, the right environment. They just don't know any better. They don't know any different, or they don't even think anything different is possible.
Mm.
But a lot of times there are the ones that, are more negative minded, more, woe is me, always looking for someone or somebody to blame or something to blame. Kind of like this, like you said, we put these out to help people. But if you look at comments on my channel, your channel, different
Yeah.
things, you get two kinds of people. You get some that look for the wisdom and the gold in every single thing, every conversation, every whatever. Then you have the ones that are just looking to be sarcastic and cynical and criticize.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's your example right there. And I guarantee you, when you look at the two individuals and their careers and their lives, you will see fruit that is born from that mindset and from that view, that worldview.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's just the world of social media. So it's very interesting how that kind of works. Now on the other spectrum, same thing with wealthy individuals. You have some that are very positive and generous, and all of that. Then you have the ones that are negative and this, that, and the other. And again, it's awareness. Some people know what they know, and and with some people, the more wealthy they get, the worse they get. With
Mm.
some, the more wealthy they get, the better they get. So you see, and I'm in an area where there, and you are too, where there is a lot of wealth, and you
Oh
can
yeah.
see those different extremes of different economies. But let's just take the generalization that we're talking about. And then the wealthy people that are happy, successful, fulfilled are seekers of wisdom. They're always building themselves. They're pouring into themselves, educating themselves, looking for the wisdom in everything that surrounds them, in every interaction, every circumstance, everything they read, hear, see. They're looking for something to glean from that. Number one. Number two, they're always looking to serve. The wealthiest people I know generally are not doing it for that reason. They're not saying, I just want to go get rich. Obviously that's great and it's a benefit of, but they're looking to solve a problem,
Yeah.
to serve others, to serve a greater good, to help others, provide solutions. And the bigger the problem you solve, the bigger the reward is generally going to be on the other side. Now there's economics that come into play and all that, and the business model has to work. But at the end of the day, the great entrepreneurs, the greatest wealth in our world has always been created by people trying to solve problems. Now, again, there's the greedy and there's the manipulative and there's those sides of the coin too. But in general, that's kind of what I see. It's that positive, open-minded, can do, always seeking to learn, taking the wisdom out of every situation, not thinking they're the smartest person they know, looking for what can they learn from anybody and everybody, and constantly growing and building and creating and solving problems versus I know everything, everybody's stupid and the world's against me, and it's just I've got bad luck.
Yeah.
That's kind of the two generalizations that you're talking about.
Yeah, the other thing that I've seen, and this only comes from knowing people a lot. I mean, I know several folks, worth significant coin in their 50s or later. And when you really talk to them about their early years, most of them had spectacular failures.
Hmm.
Some of them had multiple spectacular failures. And then when I think about the folks on the other side, very few of them, if they had a mistake, pick up the pieces and try again.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that's, back to just the examples of you and I, right? You read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and you want to be Rich Dad, and I'm Robert. I'm just I still laugh every time I think about it. Um, I would find myself perhaps on the other side, right? A spectacular failure. I might think about it too long. Where if
Hmm.
you had one, you'd be like, kick it down, shut it down, take my losses, just keep moving forward.
Yeah, it might take you out of the game completely, versus putting you at the head of the pack for
Right.
the next game.
Exactly.
And that's kind of what those two dichotomies are. And some people will take that hit and they'll be afraid to try again because they just don't
Exactly.
want to, or they can't. I mean, some people are just in a position where they just can't afford to have that happen again, whereas others just keep going, and it makes you better and it makes you stronger, and eventually, it will work and you will succeed if you learn the
Mm.
lessons of that
Yeah.
journey. That's the key. You got to be willing to learn the lessons and go, dang, I really messed that up. And here's
Yeah.
where I messed it up. And I ain't doing that again. That's that resolve I'm talking about. I will never let that happen again. Instead of a resolution, it's
Mm.
resolve. You make a vow, right? And you learn from it. Whereas, the other end of the spectrum where it can take you out of the game is that people that dwell on it and to blame and then just let it stop them because they're afraid to let it happen again. And it's a tough thing. It's a very tough thing. But, you want to embrace failures because there's going to be wisdom in there and there's going to be so much learning in there. And it's really funny, as you go along through life, and the older I get, I've always been very fortunate to know that, I'm smart. I've always been smart enough to know I don't know anything at all. Okay. And I've always been a seeker of wisdom. And the more I learn and the more I know, the more I realize I don't know. And the
Uh,
deeper you go, realize how much deeper you can go and how much further you can get. It's like the railroad tracks analogy. You stand on the tracks and you look out and they kind of disappear. You walk to that point and then you can see it again. So it's that awareness and expansion of the mind and the lessons that are learned through those obstacles and through those roadblocks and through those failures that ultimately get you to your destination. And unfortunately, a lot of people quit too soon. But again, you got to know what the right thing to keep, doing is versus the wrong thing. If you're always banging your head into a brick wall and you're doing kind of the same thing, and there's a message there,
yeah.
but just because something didn't work the first time doesn't mean it can't work again if it's done in a different way. But that's a fine line.
Yeah. You know what? Let's break this down with something that we both saw up close and personal, the Great Recession, right? The housing crash.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you know people, I know several people that were worth 7. I know one worth 8 that had to declare bankruptcy. So let's just put some specifics on this, right? What were the lessons learned from the '08 crash? Again, because the biggest point here is not doing that again, right? For example, my opinion, over leverage, right? Using variable rate debt. Even go back to Dave Ramsey's spectacular failure before he goes on to become a huge
Mm-hmm.
financial expert. He was doing short-term variable rate financing on real estate, and that that can kill you. And I think we saw a lot of people in the last recession use toxic debt structures, and it
Mm-hmm.
just ate them alive. What are some other things people should have taken from that event?
Yeah. So risking more. So again, calculating the risk and understanding the cost of that risk if realized and being able to afford it. So it's understanding what's the risk, what's the ultimate downside. If that happens, can I afford to take that hit? That's number one. Most people just don't even think about that. They just don't even think that it's even going to end. I was in that camp, pre 2009. I was at the beginning of my journey as an entrepreneur, as an investor, and I didn't know a 2009 could happen. Just didn't know. So it was a good awakening for me in terms of what can happen and how quick it can happen. But that's the number one: calculating that risk, the downside, making sure you can weather it. Number two, thinking interest rates are always going to stay low and they're always going to drop. A lot of people were under that impression, as they are now. Number three was too much equity invested. So using your own cash and putting it at risk and guaranteeing the debt. So putting up equity and guaranteeing the debt. So that's another one. And there's ways to not guarantee debt on loans and on things like that. So like I had a couple of friends that were billionaires, two of the largest developers in the Hampton Roads area. that was their mistake. And they'll tell you today, they put up the equity and guaranteed the debt, and
Mm,
they watched $300 million, boom, they just pushed a button, gone out of their bank account that the bank took, because of their issues. These guys each had their own Gulf Stream, and they got reduced to basically nothing,
mm,
and they'll never be able to recover to that level, that they were at, and they still haven't been able to. But that was what they said their big lessons were: short term interest only debt.
mm.
So short term interest only debt, 3 to 5 years is a very dangerous gamble, because everybody thinks right now interest rates are going to stay low forever. That's just what everybody thinks, and it looks like it, and the Fed's telling you that it is. We don't know. There's no guarantees.
Mhm,
And all it takes is a very small move in interest rates to exponentially affect values of real estate.
mhm.
So in real estate, that's the big one there. And speculation without multiple exits in the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So everything was speculative pre 2008-9. You bought it today, it was going to sell for more tomorrow, no matter what.
Oh,
Kind of
yeah.
like what's happening right now. Just because there's no supply, a lot of demand, interest rates are cheap. So those are the fundamental things that took a lot of people out in real estate in the 08-09. When you start looking at stocks and Bitcoin and things like that, kind of similar, where people borrowing on margin is the ones that get wiped out in those cases. And a lot of that happened. T Boone Pickens got hit hard back in 08-09, with a call option that he had, and he had to come to the table with hundreds of millions of dollars that he lost. I mean, it was pretty tough.
Yeah. The other thing that was really interesting, and the thing that I now watch religiously, is what I call the herd, right? Some people call it fear of missing out. Uh, that was my biggest takeaway from 08-09. And again, I went to, God, every conversation I had, people were in the Bay Area, they were flipping contracts. Literally,
Hmm.
they were buying condos. They were just lots. They're not
Hmm.
even sticks yet, lots. And people were flipping that contract 5, 6, 7 times. Everybody made 50 grand. That was a thing back in 08-09 or
Yeah, that
07.
whole condo flipping thing. Yeah, I mean
Freaking
that was a big. Miami
crazy.
was a big one. A lot going on in Miami, a lot going on out in Vegas, and it's kind of happening again. Not like that, because those things are very different, and the real estate climate's very different right now in terms of what's going on. But anybody who's locked into short term interest only needs to make sure that they have some options at the back end of that, and that they're not guaranteeing that debt.
Yeah. And then the other thing about fear of missing out is, again, the other thing I saw is something could be white hot and suddenly nobody wants to touch it.
Yeah,
Um, Again, it was amazing to see what was going on in 2010, right? At least in my market, stuff was selling below lot value.
yeah.
And again, this something could be so white hot, can't touch, and then suddenly nobody wants it. I had never seen anything like that. That's a memory that I will never forget.
Yeah, yeah, that was a different time. Very, whole lot of supply, whole lot of speculation going on, and then all of a sudden, no buyers, no demand. Interest rates went up, and it didn't take much of a move,
No, it didn't.
to kill it. We're seeing a lot of that now in a lot of areas, in a lot of ways. The difference is the government's pumping the liquidity out there to keep it going. We didn't
Yeah,
have that before. There was nobody at the back, at the back door
yeah,
last time, unloading the wheelbarrow full of cash to keep everything going. They did afterwards, but it was
yeah,
it was a day late and a dollar short at that
yeah,
point.
yeah. It was.
So it'll be interesting to see how long this run continues, because that's all it is. That's what the stock market is. It's the quantitative easing. It's all the banks. The Bitcoin. It's money going into that from there, because
Yeah,
it's free money. So they're like, hey, let's drive this thing up.
yeah,
And then you have the small retail investor that's jumping on that, that FOMO bandwagon. So there's going to be a lot of pain coming through this at some point. Where and when, I don't know. And a lot of it depends on what the government and the Fed end up actually doing, what that appetite looks like, and how it unwinds.
yeah. And the last thing I remember from the 08-09 crisis is kind of the banks make the rules, right?
Hmm.
The banks have the money. The banks make the rules. If they want to work with you, they will. In 2020, they want to work with you. In 2008, they didn't. If they want to lend to you with an 800 credit score, if they don't, I mean, they make the rules. That was the other thing that was a big takeaway for me from the last crisis.
At the end of the day, somebody holds that note. So
Yeah.
everything is on debt, everything's on credit. Okay. So the stocks, the Bitcoin, real estate, it's all debt.
Mm.
Okay. So when things start to deflate and devalue, there's a note holder on the other end of that conversation. And there's already conversations happening right now at the country, level, the central bank level, where certain countries are asking already for forgiveness of debt, because they've just taken such a huge hit with the pandemic.
Mhm.
So, that's the conversations that when things start to unwind and deflate and we start to, when that bubble bursts, those are the things that are going to happen. So I think, we're going to see a global write down of debt, which is sovereign nations, institutions, sovereign wealth funds, life insurance companies, that's where these conversations are going to be happening. And, you just can't keep printing and keep throwing it in there. It's got to end somewhere.
Yeah. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate this conversation. I want to thank you for your time. Any closing thoughts?
No, that was it. Just, be careful. It's
Learn your lessons. There you go. All right, man.